First, yep.
We follow it by the
Okay, okay. Yes, yes, yes. No, no worries, no worries.
So good afternoon, everyone. As this morning, to save the time, I did not present my PowerPoint, but now as we are waiting some people, so I will take 2-3 minutes to brief you about my work. I am the founding director of this CAD Community Agency for Rural Development since 2004, and that time we were in the military government, and CAD is one of four local NGOs in Myanmar. Then after 2004, we got license only in 2012. So before we work a lot. Until now, we were working in Chin State, Serai region, and Mandalay regions. Mostly, we are working on agriculture, rural development, and road construction, bridge, health. So we have a lot of activities. Anyhow, I give you my business card, and then you go visit my website, and then you will find how many sectors are working. And then one of the projects we build or we work is rural transportation or rural accessibility or rural connectivity. So uh, in Chin mostly we go on food because there's no car road. So to get a visa of cooking oil, we have to work on foot for 3 days from my village to a city. So this is the past 20 years. And then whenever we get sick, we have to carry the sick by shoulder, days and nights, crossing the river, passing the mountains, the hills to the nearest city's hospitals. So that's why even my two sisters died at home because we cannot bring them to hospital at the same time. There was no medicine in my village. That's why I was passionate or I was forced to build road and connectivity between villages. From 2004 till today, we already built around 70 kilometers in Chin State. And then where there's no UN, no government projects. So this is the photo that we and the communities build Cairo, and then we give them this project called Cash for Work or Food for Work. So the communities will spend the whole year in road construction, and then they will give money and food. We provided 10 metric tons of rice per kilometer. So local people, they are happy to dig this road because they are sure that they will have plenty of food for a year. Instead of going farming, they are not sure if they will get sufficient food for a year. But this, so uh, even till today in Myanmar, not only in Chiang State, even the whole country, there are a lot of villages which needs road connectivity because our country is poor. At the same time, the planet is poor, so uh, road connectivity between villages are urgent. At the same time, very fundamental. But as the country is poor, so and management is poor, so many remote areas are still isolated. So we are filling the gap where isolation are great. And then with the help of Relex CEO Kid, we met last November in Vietnam. Then I talked about the road construction and the way he understood about road and the way I presented the road is quite different because he thought road construction is a big concrete road with machines and so on so on. But actually, this is a very manual work, and then people build road, and then now he decided to support road construction, village connectivity in remote Myanmar around the country by putting this fundraising strategy on his website, and then as pioneer, he and other his friends or our friends already contributed some amount of money. I don't know the real meaning of RLX, but there is a big number. Anyhow, so
It's just the abbreviation of Relex.
oh, relax.
Relex, RLX.
Yeah. So
Yes.
our heartfelt gratitude goes to you and the team, those who already put contribution donation to this platform. And then I wish you all how you can help us build road connectivity between villages in Myanmar because even only in Chinstay we have 4,000 villages, and then we expect around 50% of villages are still disconnected. So we still use on foot to carry to go for merchant purpose. So we still carry goods for the flow of these goods and services in villages. That's why road construction is one of our main activities that we are currently doing in Myanmar, and the need and the big size of the necessity is quite different upon the regions. Like in Chinstay, it's the hilly areas, quite challenging. At the same time, the need is higher than the plain areas like Yarko Mandalay. So it depends on the situation, the geography, the project location, but this kind of road connectivity between villages to the cities, like smart cities, digitalized cities, we need this kind of road connectivity. Otherwise, uh, no investors come, no businessmen come. Like in Chinstay, before there is no mobile station, telephone, internet, but when we finish road construction, Telenor, MPT, Ooredoo companies arrived and set up mobile stations. And now in our villages, we have internet, Facebook, and then yes, people have more and fast access to information from Facebook. So this is one of the best impacts of building road construction connectivity in villages. So we can do a lot more, and we can convince more investors to do business to remote and rural areas if there is good road connectivity. So this is the information that I would like to give you, and then we have a website also. Here you can visit www.relaxcapital.com offering rural road aid. So this is with the help of Kit, CEO of Relex Development Company, we put up this donation call. So thank you very much. Yeah.
There was no sense of how to use the platform. First, you want to register at relexcapital.com. If you need any assistance, we have customer support that can walk you through this process. Once you learn it, it's easier than the old way than it was before. But it may take a little bit, a couple minutes of one-on-one time with our support on Telegram in order for you guys to be able to make this transition. Paul Goncharov, and he comes on Russia Today and other Russian media. He's like, it looked daunting, but once I got a hang of it, it was like riding a bike. He never forgot how to do it. So if you need assistance as far as how to contribute to Joseph's project, absolutely go to t.me/RLX Global. We'll be more than happy to help you. Thank you.
And now I give the floor to Paul, Mr. Paul, and other speakers. Thank you very much. Please let us welcome them by clapping our hands.
Join us. Join us, please, Mr. Dr. Min Zaogo. This is Shravana Marua. Well, my first words are obviously for thanking very much the organizers of this gathering for having inviting me and inviting actually Siegfried Wolf, who is Director of Research of our South Asia Democratic Forum. So, Keith, thank you very much. Regarding, Josephine Ilang Hu, whom I only met personally yesterday, I think that you just made the most moving and most important contribution to our conference. I was deeply moved. Allow me to express to you, Joseph, my sympathy for your sisters and my uh, boundless admiration for the work and effort that you and people in the Chin state have been doing. It is absolutely remarkable. This is the sort of history, this is the sort of example that I think should go worldwide to for people to understand how rural development is important. Before I will pass the floor to our speakers, I would also like to give you a bit of, some words of what I think is fundamental for us to discuss rural development in our time in our day. We must have a bit of a perspective how it came about and where it might be aiming to. Rural development is actually something that came out from the United States. Sometimes people in Europe tend to see everything in relation to Europe, but that's not quite the case. It was um, around the country life movement that this idea of rural development really came about. This idea was first institutionalized in 1908 by the first country office, country life office that was installed by Theodore Roosevelt. And already at the time, there was two basic ideas. One of the ideas is that the rural life is the backbone of a society, and one cannot lose the values of this rural life. The other one is that it is fundamental to bring the same opportunities and level of development that is available in urban cities to the countryside, and that the market by itself is not sufficient to ensure that this will happen. So this is the basic idea. It developed in several circumstances, mainly in India. In India, it is interesting to see that to a certain extent, was immediately after the independence, it was a very important movement, but it was later abandoned and was, overshadowed by the Green Revolution. And so, most very simply, by the idea that all that is needed is to have technological progress in agriculture. Agriculture is the backbone of the rural life, and so if agriculture goes, everything goes. Actually, this has been always a controversy that has been central in the rural development movement. Just a few words about myself. I am now directing the think tank, South Asian Democratic Forum, that I just spoke to you about. But most of my life, I was a politician. I was in the European Parliament. I was before that in the Portuguese Parliament, and before that I was in the Azores, the islands of the Azores Regional Assembly. So I have been a politician, but before that I was in academia, and I was exactly concentrating on common agricultural policy, and it has a lot to do with this issue of rural development. And so this idea or this tension between what we have to do is to defend agriculture, and this is the motor to solve all the rural problems. And the other perspective who says, not at all, sometimes even saying we need a complete divorce between rural life and agriculture, have been really the, the most important parts in this debate on rural development. There is a good definition. I mean, you have literally hundreds of definitions, but I just found one that I found very good on what we can understand by the rural development. It means that a movement that is looking at local products, traditional modes of manufacture, landscapes, architecture, relevant historical facts, flora, fauna, rivers and water area, gastronomic traditions, music, festivals, ritual, people, images, idioms, knowledge, and agricultural work. Fun, you would say nearly everything. And it is true. It is nearly everything on a territorial basis. And what I think is most important is exactly what I said this morning, that this debate on agriculture versus rural development really suffered an enormous transformation by the fact that smart cities have already and will have more and more embedded agriculture. Actually, it makes a lot of sense, even in terms of the building of the local climate, and of course, for a variety of other reasons, management of water and energy. So agriculture is coming to the cities, and at the same time, via the information technology revolution, everything else can come to the countryside. Of course, roads will still be important, but more and more the broadband and the electronic communication will be the decisive factor. And this transforms fundamentally the debate. Another thing that I find particularly important is actually the issue of rural development as an instrument for building dialogue and peace. And actually, I was just last month, as I was going around Sikkim and the north of Western Bengal, I came across a very interesting initiative. Actually, I just saw it in the press. I actually passed by. It was in Siliguri. I was passing by there, but I did not know about it. It was organized by an association for conservation and tourism, and they aim at developing a strong connection of a whole area that comes from eastern Nepal through the northern and eastern India and Bangladesh up or down to Myanmar, and to use all of these means that I just spoke to you about for strengthening knowledge, trust, and ultimately peace. And I think I found this an absolutely fantastic idea. I mean, there's a long time I have not been working on rural development. So in my academic times, I never heard of it. It was something completely, it's something completely different. But even in more recent times, I did work on in diplomacy, and I also made a bit 3 years in diplomacy on these issues of rural development. And actually, this was never there. I think it's something new. It started in 2011. And I think this movement is absolutely fundamental. And just by chance, I just found out that the two speakers today, they have a background on exactly peace and security. And I found this really a big coincidence. So we have Dr. Min Zhao Hu, who is the executive director of the Myanmar Institute for Peace and Security, that will follow just immediately after me. Um, will talk immediately after me, and Mrs. Shravana Barua. She is a fellow associate of the Nepal Institute of International Cooperation, and she just drafted me some notes, and they're impressive. I'm not going to read the whole of them, but I'm going to tell you that she is also working for a PhD in Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. So she's in Kathmandu, she's in New Delhi. She already developed research. Well, she's now in New Delhi, in the Jawaharlal Nehru University. She is on the Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament. Um, Her research was on the Siachen dispute between India and Pakistan. She is participating in a lot of other forums, and she has, although as we can see, quite young, she has an impressive curricula. I'm absolutely overwhelmed by it. So, Joseph has this really is really the very, very typical rural person. And so he is very modest. So he decided to go without speaking, although he had the most important words, because we were out of time. And when he ended his speech, he said, well, and now an applause for the speakers that will come after me. And I have to say, a very, very big applause to Joseph. You really are an inspiration to us all. And so, without further delay, I will pass the floor to Dr. Min Zhao Hu.
Thank you for inviting me to talk about the topics on the prospect for creating a rural-urban mixed economy. But I'm not economics, no. I'm a development person. My career is mostly on security. Something quite close to on this topic was I used to work with some of the investment firms, global investment firm, trying to create some model to predict instabilities worldwide. So that was my background career before I came back to this country, and I worked a lot in war zones. So I'm pretty much working my career on conflict, security, and stabilities. So when it comes to rural-urban mixed economy, I will come up with three perspectives that we need to consider from the lens of the security. One of the critical part of the rural-urban economy is the connectivity. So without connectivity, that rural-urban economy will be very difficult to imagine. So connectivity in terms of roads and transportation. So we have to factor in the security issues in the connectivity. So in Myanmar, as you know, Myanmar has the longest running conflict in the world. But compared to other countries in a similar situation like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, we are very much stable, relatively. So there are some reasons I'll address later. And when it comes to the connectivity in Myanmar, if we have a largest database in this country when it comes to peace and security. We collected all the instability data. We have 75 variables nationwide, and we have a database and we do analysis based on these data. So according to this data, 6,200 kilometers of all major highways fall within 5 miles of armed clashes. So that accounted about 17% of all major highways in Myanmar. So we can say that 70% of all major highways in Myanmar are impacted by the armed conflict. So if we look at the most of the armed conflict that affected the area connecting Myanmar and China, so especially Lashio Muse highway. So that highway accounted about 10 billions of trade going in and out of Myanmar. So what we can say is like the 10 billion trade route fall within 5 miles, so sometime on exactly on that highway. However, if we look at since 2011, there was a very rare incident that the business trucks or containers were targeted. The only one type of business that was targeted consistently was the export of some cows to China. That was the only business that was targeted by the armed group, but the rest pretty much not. But this is one of the significant that even though in Myanmar we will say this is 70% were impacted by the armed conflict, it rarely have a direct impact on the businesses. Therefore, we don't see that much impact on the businesses in the trade route, even though that is a part of the major trade route in Myanmar. Another part of the connectivity is if we look at the township, we have now 365 townships, and among them, 55 townships in Myanmar experienced armed conflicts, at least one armed conflict in 2018. So that accounts for about 15% of the townships affected by the armed conflict. However, unlike other war-torn countries in Myanmar, we have only two townships where armed clashes occur outskirts of populated area or the town or the city. But usually there is no conflict, no armed conflict in a populated area. So if you live in a populated area, even though there may be armed clashes around where you live, you're pretty much safe in a populated area. That is one of the significant distinction in Myanmar, despite the plethora of armed groups operating and civil war is going on, fighting is going on. It does not impact on those people who are living in the populated area, the center of the population.
I had a period of my life where I was living in southern Thailand. I was sometimes south of Hat Yai, and it was right by the border of Yala and Narathiwat. People were, would go about their day. They would go to school. They would go about their day and try not to have, a bomb thrown in a convenience store or a road bomb going off or something of the like. But I can definitely see where you're coming from. The people that actually lived in Hat Yai, for the most part, with the exception of a couple of isolated incidents, had a general feeling of security as far as going about their ways. So that these conflicts happened, on the roads on the way to Yala and Narathiwat, in Thailand. So I can vouch for that from personal experience, because in Hat Yai you didn't have to worry about someone throwing a bomb into one of the department stores. But you definitely had to be concerned about it, more towards, the rural areas or en route to those areas.
Thank you. So even though these townships are impacted by the conflict, the armed conflict, the population center are pretty much safe, and the businesses are pretty much safe as well. The second dimension, the security impact on the rural urban economy is a rent seeking in the form of extortions. So a lot of businesses experience extortions if you operate in a conflict affected area. So we now say that 55 townships that experience armed conflict, but when it comes to rent-seeking and extortion, that goes beyond where actually armed conflicts occur. So in our list, we have about 70 townships actually experience rent-seeking and extortions. Uh, but that is not uniform, one township to another. Some of the townships, you may probably have like a multiple armed groups operating. Now, in this case, you have to deal with those multiple armed groups if you are operating in that township as well. So somebody talk about the communication, and one of the example is like if you are going to set up a communication tower in conflict affected area, you have to deal with those armed groups. But in Myanmar, we have developed informal operational culture, how to work with those armed groups. So there were people who will help you out, so that like you can come up with some sort of understanding with that those armed groups so that you can operate. That's why we see the very rare violence directing towards businesses in Myanmar, because there was some sort of facilitation and some sort of arrangement, and create that informal culture that capable business to work even in an area where armed groups operate. The third dimensions I would like to address is uh, the labor and human resource. Usually in an area impacted by the armed conflict, you are likely to see uh, the migration patterns, the migration out from that area to the bigger city. So, for example, like in Shan State, Thibault, Chao Me, these are the townships that heavily impacted by the armed conflict, that affects the uh, outflow of migrants towards the other city. So if these are the three areas that we have to pay attention from the security perspective in order to foster a rural-urban mixed economy in Myanmar. Let me stop my discussion here. I'm happy to have a question answer afterwards. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? That was a very, very interesting speech. So thank you, Mr. Ben Sau, for that. Does anybody have any questions?
So perhaps we can have a, you have one?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Yes.
Please, go ahead.
The very act of our decision to start engaging with Myanmar was mixed with mixed emotions, and there was a sense of this country shouldn't be engaged with until that situation, as far as with Rakhine State and so on and so forth, is resolved. I understand that that's generally a different mindset that you're running from a Chinese or an Indian investor standpoint, but certainly from a European or an American standpoint, it could be considered questionable that we're even here having this conference, talking about investment into Myanmar, giving the country a chance, regardless of the challenges that no doubt face us. What can you tell foreign investors as far as the state of the country from a security standpoint and how it impacts rather foreign direct investment? Thank you.
As I have discussed, even though in Myanmar we have multiple armed groups operating and armed conflict is ongoing, we also have developed a coping mechanism. A coping mechanism how business can operate amidst of violence, amidst of armed conflict. So, for example, like when I used to work in Afghanistan, if you are in like a capital city, Kabul, you are likely to expose to violence. So, if you are in like Kandahar, definitely you have to be looked out for insecurity at any time. But that's not the case in Myanmar. For example, like in Kachin State, uh, while the war and there's no armed clashes going on between the Tamador and the Kachin Independence Army, Myitkyina is pretty calm. A lot of business in Myitkyina are as usual, and it's virtually not affected. And if you ask those businesses, a lot, especially like the big businesses, banks, uh, like production businesses, the factories, they have developed some mechanism to work with those non-state actors, so that non-state actors and those businesses can coexist and benefit to each other. So, for the reason, even in a heavily affected area like Pakan, you will see billions of investment, especially the natural resource extraction industries, and also like industry like the hydropower. Uh, so my sense is the armed conflict in Myanmar and what you see on the international press explain very little of the reality of Myanmar, because in this country the system has evolved its own coping mechanism to function despite all the imperfections.
Very good. Thank you so much for that. I have one question slash comment to follow with that. I think it was helpful to our investor base and other institutional investors that will be seeing this as far as considering can they include Myanmar into their investment portfolio. I think that there's a perfect match made in heaven here, however, in the sense that you're dealing with a cryptocurrency investment group, and cryptocurrency investors are generally more comfortable taking on a higher degree of risk than that of the more traditional investor. I still think that from a traditional standpoint, institutional investors would be a little waiting for the storm to clear, so to speak. Whereas I think cryptocurrency-based investors have a different risk profile, and a lot of them have a sense where they invest towards causes, they invest towards means, they invest towards what sort of outcome is my money going to produce? And if it's going to produce a sense of an integrated region and a more safe and secure state in Myanmar, I think that there would be investors that would take you up on that offer. So thank you very much.
Could I make a quick comment? In fact, I want to encourage Sigfried to pose a question. He is the perfect best counterpart to Minzo. Any comments, or he's the research director at SADF, South Asia Democratic Forum, and so he says he's comfortable.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So now the floor is yours, Ms. Shavana Barua. We will be delighted to hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Kasaka. I think it's been very, I'm very grateful to you for those words. I don't know if I deserve it, but thank you so much. It's very encouraging for young scholars like us to hear such words from you. And thank you to Hriday firstly, because he thought I was worthy of being invited. Thank you so much. And thank you, CAD and Relex, for having me here. So, since we are talking about exploring prospects for creating a rural-urban mixed economy across territories, I wouldn't know if I should speak as a scholar today because I'm amidst a lot of business people. So, I'll be giving a mixed sense of how we can mix diplomacy with telemedicine, something that can deeply impact rural-urban to mitigate the gap that we see. And like Mr. Ravindra Jain has always spoken about how he's working with programs that bring in doctors from areas where there is no transportation, for example. People don't see a lot of, they don't have MNPs to reach out to patients, to other doctors. So I think we'll have a little discussion on telemedicine today. And besides that, I would like to tell you that I'm associated as a fellow with the Nepal Institute of International Cooperation and Engagement, which is based in Kathmandu. It's a fairly new organization, and their research is based on looking at not so much on the rural aspect of it, but on the international collaborations and cooperations that we can have in the region per se. So come. So let me talk a little about, everybody's talking about collaborations. When two nations collaborate in a situation where there is a possibility of a conflict and there's a possibility of where you do not have a day-to-day interactions with people. For example, India per se did not have as much to do with Myanmar. Those lot of people believe that India is very close to Myanmar because Burma per se was a part of British India. But I don't think so. That's exactly the case. If Dr. Minza would agree with me, in fact, the Chinese, they still do have something which is called a Pokfu relationship, which is a king's folk relationship, unlike the Indians who are called the Kalas, who basically are seen as foreigners. So, despite the background that we have had, both countries being part of British colonial time, there has been a hiatus in their relationship in terms of investments, in terms of having people to people relationship. Though bordering areas of Northeast India do share a lot of culture with them, a lot of in terms of religion and ethnicity as well, if not so much of language. So I would like to talk about diplomacy, how two nations can actually collaborate. And diplomacy, just a very simple definition you can find on the web, is something about the profession, activity, or skill of managing international relations, typically by a country's representatives abroad. So we do have representatives abroad in a classical sense of an ambassador, of an envoy that is based in a nation that a country has diplomatic relations with. However, later on in the 90s, and when the technological sense, when globalization hit, it wasn't enough to just have an envoy or an ambassador or a diplomat in a country. There had to be something much more than that. And that is when there was a sense of having multi-track diplomacy. There's track one, which is a government to government level diplomacy, but there's track two, which is professional conflict resolution, and most importantly for today, track three, which is the business diplomacy that we have been talking about since morning. And then there is track four, five, 6, 7, 8, and so on. So I think it's very important for us to understand that when we have relations in terms of business, we are involving ourselves with something called the track three diplomacy, which is getting business people from two countries to talk to each other and help each other's country in terms of development, whether it is rural or urban. So going on to uh, speaking about how telemedicine can be dealt with at 2 or 3 levels. The first is, let's talk with what telemedicine is. The remote diagnosis and treatment of patient by means of telecommunication technology. I won't elaborate too much on that because I think in the previous session we have explained how telemedicine could work in rural areas. However, we have a few evident benefits in terms of increasing access to healthcare, health outcomes, reduces health cost, which is very, very important because you don't have to build highways, you don't have to build roads in the likes of big investments that we are talking about. Just a simple road, like Mr. Joseph was talking about, there was no road. So simply having a simple road, or if not even a road, just a telecommunication line with a good internet connection. And I believe that in 2018, 120%. I'm picking these numbers up from previous speakers. So they've told about how since 2009 to 2019 today, from about 9% to 120% of people have started using the internet. So simply by using internet, you don't need roads, you don't need highways, you don't need too much of infrastructure. You can actually help the rural people who are in need of a lot of, simple. People die of fever, people die of, diarrhea. Simple things that we can't think of are not available to people at the rural and grassroots level. So we have different stakeholders here when we're talking of telemedicine. We have patients, doctors, pharma industry, law agencies, and telemedicine technicians. However, in terms of law agencies, there are two ways of engaging in telemedicine in terms of government to government, which falls under the track 1, and for business to business, which falls under track 3. Because per se, for a government to government, we will need a MOU in place. We will need a lot of legal agencies to come in and see how the two countries can function at the government level. We don't need so much of formalities at the business level. Anybody can start building collaborations and provide services. So coming to the next point, I've already said how government to government track 2 can work in telemedicine. Just to give you an example, uh, so in 2015, India had a telemedicine MOU signed in Central Asia, in Kyrgyzstan. So Prime Minister Modi was there, and mostly Apollo Pharmaceutical Industry, the hospital, which is based out of New Delhi, and also the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Both these organizations had doctors go across to Bishkek, and they had an MOU signed where they started since 2015 a telemedicine process which has been in place since then and helping countries. So probably we can work on that model and utilize that and implement it in India-Myanmar relations, or even for that matter, any other country. So the Ministry of External Affairs of India had said that it's an attempt to leverage our prowess in the IT to bridge the digital divide in developing countries and to bolster their capacity in critical areas of health. The critical areas of health is something that we will find lots of pockets in Myanmar, particularly in regions like Northeast India, particularly. So I think this is something we should look out for and think when we go back home, if this can be implemented or this model can be replicated, so to say. Then the third track that we are talking about here is business. Business or peacekeeping through commerce. This is the field of business and its actual potential effect on peace building through the provision of economic opportunities, international friendship and understanding, informal channels of communication, and support for other peacemaking activities. Here I would just brief you a little on an organization that I was involved in for 3 years, from 2012 to 2015. It's my home institution back in Guwahati, Assam, which is a border state in Northeast India. And it's a dermatological institution where we have had 3 camps in rural areas since 2009. The latest one was on 3rd of February 2019 in a very small village, rather, in Assam. And there was a turnover within a week's time. There was a turnover of more than 600 patients who had come for simple. Somebody had a pimple, somebody had a scar, but they were all there listening to the 7 doctors that conducted the free survey. And a lot of companies, which are basically pharmaceutical companies, the representatives have given them free medicines, and it was a big success, and people really got a free medication, they got education. There was a small seminar that was organized, and I spoke to people there, and they are looking for collaborations in Myanmar as well, which is quite good, because there are patients, interestingly, to Guwahati from Bhutan and Bangladesh, increasingly in the past 5 years. So from Bhutan particularly, we have 3 points of entry in the border. So people in the border areas of Bhutan don't have to take a flight to Thimphu, for example, and spend so much of money, because I believe almost 60% of your cost goes in transportation. So they would prefer coming into Guwahati or any place which gives them access to good doctors, good medicines. So they, in the last 5 years, we've had ample of people coming down from Bhutan, which I thought was very interesting, and and also from Bangladesh. But however, when it comes to India, Bangladesh, we have a lot of political issues with them. We don't know who's actually a foreigner in terms of having a Bangladesh citizenship or not. So we can develop something like that. We don't have too many from Myanmar, because probably there are no roads, there are no direct flights or whatever. The Indian government had put down the Udan, UDAN. They had about a couple of flights directly from Guwahati to Bangkok, for example, to Colombo. So the Uran project has been put into place, but we still don't have direct flights to Yangon. I've had to take a very long flight and detour to Bangkok, wait there for 2 hours, and so we can work on that as well. So, like I said, the Apollo Hospital provides telemedicine in states like Himachal. They are looking for international collaborations as well. Similarly, BIDS, which is based out of Guwahati, it's a dermatological institution. You don't need too many infrastructural, infrastructure in place to have that. But however, we do need basic of some things for this to work. Let's see, what do we need. So, what do we need for collaboration in telemedicine? Firstly, just simple infrastructure at both ends. I know it is very difficult in a rural village to have even simple internet. So, firstly, we do have to work on our digital economy out here, or as well as in another country which is looking out for such a cooperation. Secondly, a simple physicist or a paramedic who can explain to the doctor sitting across what problem actually the patient is facing. It's very difficult for patients to say, I'm having this or that problem, because there could be language barriers, there could be issues. People do get intimidated even by looking at doctors, what they want to do. Looking at injections, we are scared of even saying what disease we have. So we do need general physicists or paramedics or a nurse or somebody to help out. So if we want to work this out at a very, very rural grassroots level, we will need some staff to help us out with this, and to avoid language barriers, besides a few other things that do exist, that we need in place for telemedicine to actually function. So just talking about a little on the pros and cons. Mostly there are pros. I can see that it's very cheap. It decreases the rural-urban gap in terms of health sector, and reach out to rural population. That's the big aim that we are looking at. And cons, I would say that not all diseases can be dealt with in terms of telemedicine. Not all things can be done through telemedicine. You actually have to go to the doctor there, and it could be a slow process. So that's about it. I just wanted to bring out the idea of how diplomacy and telemedicine can actually work in bridging the gap. And lastly, I would just want to talk a little on the organization I'm associated with, which is NIICE. So our mission is to have a R&D program with other, scholars based out of Myanmar or based out of countries in and around Nepal, who are willing to cooperate with us in terms of reaching out to rural people, whether doing research on security issues, whether doing research on political issues. So any suggestions or any collaborations, I'll be most willing to speak about them later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barua, for this very interesting presentation, this new angle where telemedicine comes with diplomacy. And you gave an example that is also very important, the one of Bhutan and India. And just allow me as well to say, answering a bit to the challenge raised by Keith just a while ago, that in November I was in the refugee camps at the Rohingya both the Muslim and the Hindu, on the Bangladeshi side of the border. And I think we have a very serious issue in front of us. And the fact that I'm here does not mean that I do not think it is a very serious issue. It does mean, however, that I think it is fundamental to face it. It is fundamental to have a dialogue with all the parties involved, and specifically with people like yourself and people like the Chin state representatives, because this is an example that really shows how peaceful cooperation can do the trick. And they are just side by side with the Iraqi state. So it proves how things can be different. And I think that we need a lot of dialogue. We need to be aware of those who want to poison the situation. This is absolutely fundamental. I was there in Bangladesh. I rapidly understood that there were several actors that were not there for the sake of peace and for the sake of reconciliation. That's quite obvious to me with a certain experience. So I would like to say to you that this was the reason why that I thought it was so important for me to come and to be here with you. I think Myanmar is a wonderful example. It really came across very important challenges, but did not overcome all of them. And we have to look at it in a spirit of cooperation, of humble ignorance from my side, because I have been here. I'm not coming to give lessons to everyone, no one. I'm coming to learn, but I think that this dialogue is very important. So sorry for this comment, an extra program. I don't know if any of you want to raise any other issue. Yeah, please, Dr. Zikrid.
Yes, thank you, dear Chairman. Hello. And thank you to your speakers for your very interesting presentations. I have a question to Shabana. Well, actually, to all of you. I talked during my presentation on perceptions and attitude, partly when it comes to Europe and Asian regions. My question is, when you have all these online services, do you discover or do you have experience of the cultural issue? For example, are there different perceptions on telemedicine in Southeast Asia or South Asia or Europe? For example, some people from certain countries with cultural backgrounds might be not so happy to talk about health issues online when you don't have this people-to-people contact. So does culture matter when it comes to online services?
Thank you for that question. It's very interesting, rather, because when you talk about culture, there are multiple of them out here. We are not talking about one culture or one society or one ethnicity. And just to pick from my example of Assam and having that sort of a interaction with people in the rural places, it depends from area to area. Some people have it in their culture to be outspoken, to go out there, to be very comfortable. So definitely culture does matter. But most importantly, people are unaware so far. When you talk about telemedicine, they don't even know what it is. When you talk about coming to a doctor and showing things to a doctor, I do have to say that at least in Assam, where I have an experience, they do not shy away. They are very, very vocal about what they have. In fact, the more rural the people of the background, the more open they are, which was very, very interesting. Because a lot of people from the cities, they have developed, there's a socialization process that goes in, and they are shy, and sometimes they are including children. And because if a child comes in, because they're ignorant, they'll be like, oh, this is what I have, this is where I have it. but the more educated, more cultured you are, so to say, you get more shy. So that is an interesting observation I could give as an answer. So yes, culture does matter, but it's not a thing that this culture or that culture. There's a lot besides that.
Thank you very much. If there is no one else, I think
I
that we
have,
can pass the floor.
yeah,
Oh, you have
thank
a
you.
question?
I do have a question comment. Anybody sitting behind? I see all of silent faces. Vladimir, anything to ask? Nothing. So yeah, let me again come back like what Shabana said. There is a need for roads, yes, definitely, and somebody who can help us do that is one who had hosted the program, the organizer, the very organizer, Joseph, and somebody who can run the cars is me sitting behind or Ne's having a coffee there. So he's the guy who can run the cars. We have the person sitting here who can build the roads, and Keith who can generate some amount of investments for sure. I'll just make a quick flashback comment. I had helped a lady back in 2012. She was ambassador of India to Bangladesh, and also in some consultancy position with the Myanmar embassy here. So we did a program in 2012 where we had invited 15 newly elected MPs to India. There's a university. I was there for 2 years. So we did a massive program. Unlike the program, I'm enjoying this program all the more because it's way back in 2012 January. We have people from academia, think tank, private sector. Minzo, he's a face of democracy in the Western countries. Trust me, you are. All credit to you. So, conflict resolution experts, private sector. So, this is a motley where things can be really worked out. The message is right. What I heard from you, like Myanmar, somehow I could correlate it to Israel. The Western media somehow presents Israel in a very different way, but there is a lot of investments and things happening within the country. So a message needs to be passed across to the global community, including the investor community, traditional investors, the new investors, that it is safe. So come in here, and somebody who can do it is yourself and also the collective set of people we are here. Joseph, yourself, you should be taking more responsibilities, sir. Thank you once again. Paulo, all thanks for the wonderful session.
Thank you very much. So now the floor is yours.
No, sir. I'm sorry to bug all you guys.
Okay, so we have coffee and snack, then we will start again. Thank you.
Yes, that's what I need. That's what I need. The mic is yours.
Just 3 minutes late. 3 minutes late. My pending device and then
No problem. Q&A. Q&A. My ID is coming. So in a few minutes, we will start the last session. they use PowerPoint, right? Unit, you can test PowerPoint. Clearly, you will be the last, right? So you cannot use the PowerPoint. Who have?
Yeah, it's on the system.
Who have? Ah, okay. Okay, so let us start the last session. Please give us a clap hand to welcome the last session panelists and speakers. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This works here. This is not working, so if I tell you to go forward. Okay, well, it's been a very long day, hasn't it? Wow, we are way behind schedule, that's for sure. I'm going to make a promise to you all, and that promise is I am going to be brief. Probably keeping this down to about 10 minutes. And I think it's very fitting that we close this day really talking about a major revolution. And it's not a people revolution, it's an industry revolution. It's called Industry 4.0.
Some people like to refer to it as the fourth industrial revolution. So I'm thrilled to be delivering the topic. It's a very interesting one, and it raises a lot of issues and challenges, in particular for the ASEAN region. By way of background, I'm from the United States. I have been in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, for almost 2 years now, in the capacity as head of the Graduate School of Business at RMIT University in Vietnam. RMIT is the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, whose headquarters is in Melbourne. And we also have campuses in Europe and other parts of Asia. So that is my role. Really, what I want to make this topic today more about sort of the what if. Okay. So I really want to focus on only three things today. I don't want to give you a long talk on what is Industry 4.0, what are the components. That would take me hours to do. Okay. I think more importantly, what I want to engage you all in is a discussion about the opportunities and challenges, some of which, by the way, were talked about earlier this afternoon, but I want to also drill down on some more opportunities and challenges, particularly for the ASEAN region. And really also talk about how do we take the power and the opportunity of Industry 4.0 to get the member countries of the ASEAN region together with some kind of connection. Okay, so we need to dream about Industry 4.0 because a lot of Industry 4.0, there are things that are happening we talked about today, things like smart cities, smart factories. However, we are really just on the cusp of Industry 4.0. We haven't even made major developments in it. So let's dream together about Industry 4.0. There we go. I want to start actually with a quote, and this was from the person who really is sort of the father of Industry 4.0, and that's Professor Klaus Schwab. Now, he was the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and Industry 4.0 as the concept really evolved out of Germany, and he made a very, very, very important statement last year at the World Economic Forum. Quote: "There has never been a time of greater promise or greater peril." What's important about that statement is that, particularly if the ASEAN region embraces the components of Industry 4.0 successfully, it represents an incredible level of opportunity for the region. For those countries, or in the region of ASEAN, or even the cities in some of the countries that do not take advantage of some of these emerging technologies, it's really going to be an era of peril, meaning they're going to fall way behind some of the developing countries that are currently embracing the technologies of Industry 4.0. So it's an important point to be made, that as difficult as it is to create and embrace these technologies, that's really the direction of where industry is going. So how does Industry 4.0 fit into all this? Now, if you think about the world, the history of the world of industrialization, we really had, prior to Industry 4.0, we had three major revolutions. So in the early 19th century, we had the steam engines and steam power that really catapulted industry and created that Industry 1.0 revolution. Industry 2.0 was really heralded in by mass production, Henry Ford, cars, manufactured in great quantity. We proceeded into Industry 3.0, which we all know because we were part of the 3.0, with computers and the digitalization of products, be it books or music or what have you. And it's really Industry 3.0 which is going to catapult us into Industry 4.0. So it really is, it's a revolution. And it's a very exciting revolution for us all. I'm not going to go through every single component of Industry 4.0, but if I were to do a diagram of all of them, this is essentially the major backbone of Industry 4.0. Everything from robotics, I'll talk a little bit about that as well, to the integration of systems, to very popular term now, the Internet of Things, IoT. I'll talk about that in a moment. To additive manufacturing, computing, virtual reality, also called augmented reality, and big data. I'll talk about that as well. And cybersecurity is a big issue as well. So I think, these really make up the major components of Industry 4.0. If you think about probably the one component of Industry 4.0, which is really the backbone of it, is IoT. There are so many devices right now that you all know that are connected to the internet, and it's the Internet of Things. So devices, and I read a study recently of Gartner, which is a think tank from the United States, and Gartner has done a lot of research. It's really a think tank, and what Gartner says or predicts that by 2021, which is not very far off, there will be about 25 billion devices connected to the internet. And of course, you all know consumers are connected to the internet through their phones, through even some advances in home technology, like appliances, televisions, internet connected. But also industry plays a very big part of internet connection, of the Internet of Things. And we talked about a lot about that today with industry connection. So the Internet of Things is really, that's the backbone of Industry 4.0, making those connections. I just want to briefly comment on some of the things that were not talked about today, which are really advancing Industry 4.0. Industrial robotics, we didn't really talk about that today, but a lot of countries, the developed countries, you look at Japan, the United States, really countries that are leading the charge on industrial robotics. What is robotics going to do in industry? Well, right now, what it's doing is it's, of course, replacing, in many instances, human involvement on production. And industrial robotics are going to create incredible efficiencies of production. And they'll be able to produce things at, in many cases, less cost, quicker, right? And industrial robots will be performing the functions of manufacturing in some instances in factories where health and safety are an issue, but it's no longer a health and safety issue when you have industrial robotics. It takes the human element out of it. So we're going to see a lot of advancements in industrial robotics moving forward, okay? I'm not going to talk much about blockchain. We talked a lot about blockchain, but really when you think about Industry 4.0, it is the integration of finance with tech, and we call that fintech. And there was a lot of talk today about this sort of, the encrypted, the digital ledger, which is what blockchain is, but keep in mind also, it's not just about the blocks of information on finance. Industry 4.0 will also be empowered by blockchain blocks of information that are going to help logistics and supply chain management with blocks of information from manufacturer through the value chain. Okay, so that's an important part as well. We also didn't talk much about additive manufacturing. I think with some of the really exciting things happening right now are in 3D, right? 3D printing. And, there are a lot of companies right now that are embracing 3D manufacturing right now and creating prototypes in very quick modes. I know Nike is doing a 3D for some of their footwear, and you have other industry sectors doing it as well. And it really means tremendous advancements in creating product prototypes very quickly. It also means the production of products in just-in-time or JIT manufacturing. And that's really going to push and advance manufacturing to a great deal as more and more companies are adding additive manufacturing. We all know virtual reality, right? That pretty picture of a person with the VR equipment. This has already made its way into the consumer space. I know a lot of the millennials are getting very excited about VR, right? Walking around doing VR, but also VR is going to be a major technology advancement currently deployed in great numbers in manufacturing, as the technology itself can be integrated into product introductions, into helping consumers with understanding things like tours of retail outlets and so on and so forth. So I think we're going to see a lot of augmented reality in the manufacturing sectors. Industry 4.0 is all about big data and analytics. And it's going to power a lot of new business models and decisions in manufacturing and industry in general. Big data is very important because really what you're talking about when you have the Internet of Things, right, IoT, you're talking about storing data not on these legacy servers, which have been around forever, but it's really storing data and information in the cloud. We've all heard of the cloud, right? And we can access the cloud no matter where you are. What is this going to do for industry? It means that no matter where you are for a particular company, if you have headquarters in one country, you're overseas, have regional manufacturing or other outlets, you'd be able to share data across the cloud. And right now we do have a lot of information that's shared on the cloud. So this is going to be very important, but it's also in terms of analysis of the data. When you have large volumes of data that's stored on the cloud, decision making in business operations and manufacturing will be well advanced because you can now analyze lots of data in the process of the manufacturing. So really what I want to get to today is to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities and challenges. I know before lunch we did talk about many challenges in the era of digital economy or the gig economy. I want to raise a couple of other issues, and I raise these issues because I think it's important for everybody in this room to understand as we advance into Industry 4.0, there are going to be significant issues and challenges and also opportunities that this region, the Asian region, will have to confront. Okay? So let's think about this, and maybe there'll be some questions at the end for people that are interested in talking some more about some of these issues and challenges. No, not done. No, not done. Look, in the member countries of ASEAN, the ASEAN region, Myanmar, of course, being one of them. And what are the key opportunities? Clearly, if Industry 4.0 is successfully embraced by the ASEAN countries in this region, there's going to be a potential for huge economic growth. I know according to the World Economic Forum, they did a white paper on this called ASEAN 4.0, what does the fourth industrial revolution mean for regional economic integration? They projected that increased productivity is going to really unleash a potential of $220 to $625 billion in annual economic power of ASEAN by 2030, if done correctly. Right? Empowering SMEs. Now, one thing that wasn't really talked about today is what's the backbone in terms of business of the developing world. And the backbone of businesses, ASEAN region in particular, are small and medium enterprises. That's where most of the workers are. That's where most of the things are produced in terms of service. And I really believe in looking at the potential of Industry 4.0 that because of the Internet of Things and some other technologies, that SMEs will be emboldened to advance in ways they've never had before. So, for example, one of the problems with SMEs is that they don't have access in many ways to financial resources and to information. Part of being a small, medium enterprise, you just don't have it. But with the rise of huge digital marketplaces and power and information over the net and over the cloud, I think that a lot of SMEs can connect to larger, what we call giant regional markets or marketplaces. So that's going to be an interesting development in ways that have never been done before. Connecting citizens. A very interesting talk today about how citizens are now going to be connected through smart cities, of course, through mobile devices and the like. And I think that Industry 4.0 is going to take that up to a different level. In the developing countries where infrastructure problems have been an issue, where the penetration of mobile phones is not as deep, in other infrastructure, we're going to see the ability of citizens to be further connected to commerce and to themselves as well by Industry 4.0. There's a very interesting concept here called the opportunities for leapfrogging. The ability for companies, particularly in the developing countries, to leapfrog what has been developments that have already helped some of the developed countries. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about the fact that with further mobile phone penetration, which a lot of developing countries are now seeing, we're seeing that in Myanmar, the developed countries, whether it's US or Japan or others, have put an enormous amount of money and resources into telephone in terms of fixed landlines that have been around forever. In the case of developing countries where there's so much access to phone through smartphones that uses a whole leapfrog and not have to invest all this money into things like land, that's a tremendous asset. I think in another instance, if you think about the trend towards online and mobile banking, I mean, in many ways, the proliferation of online and mobile banking, I think, is really going to reduce the need for a network of banking retail outlets. I think we're saying, I know in the United States, there's a fully 100% online bank. So to the degree that Industry 4.0 can bring in business models that are relying really on online domains, this can reduce a lot of the reliance on some of the current modes of doing business, like the physical bank branches. Okay. Also, a lot of developed countries have put an enormous amount of money and resources into very expensive power distribution networks, electricity networks. In developing countries, the ability to have localized, renewable energy production, such as solar energy, and now the big hot thing right now is battery storage, electric battery storage. Those kinds of technologies will reduce the need to invest in all these very, very expensive power distribution networks that's been at the heart of the developed world. Well, I think another exciting development that we're seeing right now are drones. You all know drones, right? Drones very popular. We're seeing a lot of drones in America, for example. I know Amazon is trying to use drones for the delivery of some of its goods to the end user. And for the developing countries in the ASEAN region, I think drones might really help on delivering lightweight, high-value goods, such as medical supplies, in areas of very remote areas that need medical supplies, and where the infrastructure of roads is not very well developed and it's hard to get to. So I think we're going to see a lot of advancements in drone technology, whether it's delivery of medical or delivery of food during natural catastrophes. So I think you'll see some interesting development on drone technology. But again, this involves lots of resource and money. And also, I think government needs to be behind this as well. You can't advance Industry 4.0 unless you have the willpower, the resources, and the government behind Industry 4.0. I just want to sort of end today. I want to talk about some challenges that really were not discussed in the advancement of digital technology. Okay, let me quickly go through this a couple of minutes. Robotics, I think we're going to see some job losses. I think you have many developing countries in ASEAN have been reliant on low-skilled labor, right? And with the advancement of artificial intelligence and robotics, unfortunately, I think we're going to see some displacement of some of the low-skilled labor because they'll be taken over by some robotics and AI, okay? Was mentioned a little bit earlier, too, about what point I'll make here, inequality and political instability. As some of the countries that are advancing on Industry 4.0, we talked about Singapore today. Thailand is sort of doing Thailand 4.0. There may be a point at which some of the countries are advancing much more than others in the ASEAN region, where some of those countries that are not advancing will be left behind. There's going to be a huge disparity in economics between some of those countries that are not advancing and those that are. A couple other points before I turn it over. Clearly, the developing countries have been a target of a good target for foreign direct investment. And it's this idea of the end of the traditional factory Asia. In a way, AI, artificial intelligence and robotics might displace, it might actually improve manufacturing to the point where unskilled labor will be displaced. What might that mean in the future? It might mean higher unemployment rates among those that don't have, those kinds of skilled labor to produce in manufacturing. And I think also in the Asiana region, where you have not SMEs but the larger organizations, they're going to be competing in Industry 4.0 against some of these large, giant firms that have huge presence in terms of platform businesses. Competing against, as you probably know, competing against Facebook, competing against Amazon, and some of the larger platform businesses, Google as well. And we didn't talk much about this risk factor here. As we move into Industry 4.0 in a very big way, where data is now stored on the cloud, not in secure servers, we are going to be confronted with a huge problem. I hope it's not huge, but that is cybersecurity issues. And countries are going to have to deal with potential sort of cyber hacking attacks as we move more diligently into Industry 4.0. So I think in sum, if I were to say what are the key opportunities for the Asian countries in this region, data sharing. You got to remember, Industry 4.0 does not have any boundaries. There are no boundaries in countries. As we move into more cooperation in the region, there's going to be opportunities for data sharing. There'll be huge opportunities for trade and manufacturing, not in the traditional way, but trade and manufacturing, even in digital products. Okay? Regional education networks. This is a very interesting point from an educational perspective. Because there might be displacement of skill or low skill talent, people losing their jobs in Industry 4.0, I think there's going to be a big need to retrain people to improve their skill sets and move into positions that they have not had in the past. And that means that the region in itself might have to improve its ability to offer internet-based education, educational networks across the region where students have access to education in non-traditional ways. Okay. Let me just move to the last one over here, innovation incubators. Clearly in Industry 4.0, there are some countries, Singapore being one, Vietnam being another one, in which there are lots of developing incubators or activators. These are places where innovation of businesses are being launched. And in some cases, hopefully many of them being induced by venture capital. And we're going to see a lot more incubators where new businesses are being formed in hopefully in different parts of the ASEAN region. So I'm going to just end there because really what I wanted to make this is an issue-based, opportunity-based discussion. And I will just leave you with this question. Are you ready for Industry 4.0?
Yes.
I heard a yes over there. Okay. Good answer. Anyway, thank you for that. And we can open it up for questions maybe a little bit later. Yep. So I'm going to turn this over to Eureka. Hey, Eureka? Are you ready?
Okay. I don't even have the time to make a video statement to the next speaker. He is joining us online. He is a co-founder of the Emerging Europe Alliance, Andrew Google, and you do the introduction and then we'll get there. Is the video coming up? You're going live, Andrew. Are you you seeing me somewhere? Are you seeing me? No. Are you? Yeah, yeah. Are you hearing me, Andrew? Okay.
First, we gotta work on Industry 2.0 first, you know.
That's true. You can't hear it. Put me on this, man.
Please try restarting Skype.
Yeah, I think you can.
Today, connect with yeah, connecting the compounds. This technology. Digital technology.
Yeah, we love it, we hate it at the same time, right?
Why don't you put the microphone right on the laptop speaker so that we can hear what he's saying? Let's go Industry 1.0. Let's take one step back. There you go. But don't hold it too close so we don't get some echo. Industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0.
Absolutely fine.
Right? It goes like
So
this.
we were just speaking about 4.0. Now we are back to 4.1. So again, good afternoon to all of you. My name is Andrew Robel, and I am the founding partner at Emerging Europe. I am responsible for strategy and content at Emerging Europe. It's a real pity that I cannot see you. It would have, it would be much better, but it's still a great pleasure to be able to speak to you today. So before I talk about today, let me just take a small step back. We're in 2019 now, but I want to refer quickly to 1989. 1989 was a very interesting year for our region, for Emerging Europe. As you know, in November 1989, the Berlin Wall started falling apart, but communism had fallen in some other countries of Emerging Europe a little bit earlier: Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, just to name a few. Over the last 3 decades, our countries have. But can you still hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to double check. So I was saying that over the last 3 decades, our countries have developed significantly. Some of them are now called developed economies. For example, Slovakia, Poland, Estonia, or Czechia, or the Czech Republic, if you like this name. What hasn't changed over the last 30 years is, or what hasn't changed much over the last 30 years, is how the region is perceived. So in the minds of plenty of people in Western Europe, in America, there are still those 4 countries that have never had nothing to offer, and if they do have something to offer, it's usually poor quality, which is obviously not the case, which is not true. Some of our countries achieved more over the last 3 decades than some other countries, for the first 50 years after the Second World War. And Emerging Europe is here. Our role, basically, our mission is to change this perception. And Emerging Europe is a business, research, and media platform. We were set up 6 years ago. And our mission is to contribute to the growth of the region, to further growth of the region, to economic, social, and democratic growth of the region. And I have to admit that we believe that
emerging Europe is actually the future of the old continent. So I was talking about communism for a bit, and I was complaining about that to some extent. But there have been, I mean, there were quite a few bad things about communism, but there were also some good things. And one of the good things is the education that was there. So what we have now, what the post-communist countries can boast about now, is this excellent technical and maths education or analytical education or skills of its people. So right now, if I look at our region, and it's 23 countries that we cover, there's perhaps only one. Oh, I can see you now. That's fantastic. It's much better to be addressing people. So when I look at our map, and we cover 23 countries, the whole of Eastern Europe plus the Caucasus countries, there's maybe one single small country that is not promoting itself as a fantastic IT destination. And the reason behind that is that they have an enormous tourism potential. So this is more important for them than the IT sector. But other than that, all the other 23 countries, they boast about their IT sector. So if you for example look at Ukraine, at Poland, at Romania, which is our region's biggest economies, they have thousands of IT firms. And the region has massive companies, such as Belarusian EPAM, for example, that is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. But there are also small ones. And about a month ago, I went to Moldova, a small republic, former Soviet republic of Moldova, where I met a 24-year-old entrepreneur who runs his own IT firm, IT outsourcing firm, and he already employs 14 full-time web developers. So you can see that this sector is huge in the region. IT, innovation, technology, and business services in general are something we have seen growing significantly over the last few years, and we as an organization promise to help this sector, promise to promote the sector further. And if you have a look at all the other markets, such as the US or the UK here, Germany, Scandinavia, that we call them the buying markets, you can see what demand for IT services there is. And if you look at the UK here, there are 600,000 vacancies in digital technology nowadays, and this costs the UK economy about 63 billion pounds a year. Germany, on the other hand, has 1.1 million job vacancies, and it takes 163 days to find a software developer. If you look at, again, the United States, software engineers have been at the top of the hardest to fill jobs in the US. According to the App Association, I'm just going to give you a couple of numbers to show you the potential. According to the App Association, there are 223,000 job openings in the US alone. Denmark is expected to come short of 19,000 IT professionals by 2030. Finland has an immediate need for 7,000 software developers. And just to give you one more example from our own yard, so to speak, back in November 2018, we organized our Innotech event in Stockholm, Sweden, and we had 50 Nordic companies who registered for that event. They all claimed that their joint outsourcing budget for the next 12 months exceeded €500 million. So we're talking about massive potential. And seeing all this, last year, Emerging Europe started a new initiative, which is one of our biggest initiatives. It's called the Emerging Europe Alliance for Business Services, Innovation and Technology. The interesting thing about it is that when we were getting ready to launch it exactly a year ago, we approached a few of our partners, clients, and we invited them to become members of the alliance. And we were hoping to have within, well, less than 10 days, we had 17 founding members on board, and among them we had PwC in Central and Eastern Europe. We had, the PwC covers 27 countries in the region. Cushman & Wakefield, Solons, SIG, HFS Research, and a number of leading associations and companies from the emerging Europe region. So if you look at the alliance, it is not supposed to replace any organizations, but it is supposed to strengthen them and help them build a community within the region, as well as a bridge between emerging Europe and all the other markets. And when I talk about all the other markets, I mean Western Europe, I mean America, but I also mean emerging regions such as emerging Asia. We are here to help, and we offer our members a wide range of different services. Events, the closest one is an EdTech conference here in London in April, which is hosted by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The bank is absolutely the biggest individual or investor in our region, but we also offer matchmaking activities, market intelligence, research, and so on and so on. But I think, again, I would like to emphasize that the most important element is building this community that is driving change for the region and with the region. I already said that we believe the region is the world's or the old continent's powerhouse, but it might also be the world's powerhouse and has the potential to become the leading IT innovation and technology delivery destination. And we're doing our best to achieve it all by creating a massive network of organizations. So if any of you is interested in joining the community, definitely reach out to myself or to my colleague. We have talking about this change and growth. So we created 3 different bodies within the initiative. One of them is the advisory committee. The advisory committee consists of individuals who represent buying markets and leading global associations, for example. So we have the CEO of IAOP, which is absolutely the biggest organization of this kind. Then we have the steering committee, which consists of individuals from our region, and we have the Council of Ministers, which is supposed to translate the knowledge into improvement in the business climate. Recently, we invited the former president of Bulgaria, who actually helped his country become an IT destination, to become an honorary chairman of the Council of Ministers. So, like I said, we are open to reaching out to different markets and helping different markets, and maybe helping you or anybody else to implement similar initiatives, similar ideas to make the region grow. If you have, like I said, any questions to me, I'll be happy to answer them. You can drop me a line. My email is andrew@emerging-europe.com. You can easily Google Emerging Europe, And if you have any questions now, I can also take them.
Okay, Hriday here. Andrew, very nice hearing from you. We have a packed house. Like there would be some questions. Again, Relex had become a member of Emerging Europe Alliance. We are perhaps the only cryptocurrency in the list of members. And we have Oksana from Belarus who wants to ask you a question. She does not speak English. So Paulo Casaka, who is a ex-member of EU Parliament, he would be translating this for you.
Oh.
Okay.
Paulo agrees.
Some question from you?
No.
Oksana, but I can't speak Russian. So
Let me tee things off for a second. So, in relation to Belarus, in relation to President Alexander Lukashenko's decree number 8, from your perspective you see that you have a American founded and engineered company that all of a sudden found itself, having its operating hub being in Belarus, right? So that's one example of many, or a few. I'd like to hear your perspective on that in terms of what sort of economic potential, in terms of, you can give me metrics in terms of GDP, you can give me metrics in terms of other elements of economic growth. What do you see forward for Belarus from their leading legislation towards digital transformation in Europe? What do you see coming from that? And after you reply, then I'll pass it on to Oksana.
So last year, I took part in a conference in Minsk. Actually, this was called Emerge. It took place in May last year, and this was pretty much right after the legislation had been implemented. I think that right now, and this is what I've been hearing from a number of different people, namely in Belarus, is that the framework to implement great ideas and attract investors into the sector to Belarus is out there. What is still sort of missing is the sort of everyday legislation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So basically, So I think that as soon as that has been in place, and I know that that Belarus is working on that, as soon as that is in place, we might see much more movement towards Belarus than we see now. Because I remember this fuzz that was created by the decree, but this was more than a year ago, and you have around a year ago, as far as I remember, but you haven't heard much going on in around that in Belarus. So I think that once this part has been in place, we might there is. I mean, if you look at Belarus, the potential is enormous. It's a market of 10 million people, not even that, if you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But the number of IT companies there is crazy. And I already mentioned, one of the biggest companies from our region, EPAM, which is a Belarusian company. Not everyone knows that companies like Viber or services such as Viber were actually created in that country. So I think that you can see the potential. The legislation has to be sort of improved, the everyday legislation. And only then will we see more growth.
Very interesting. I must say, I think it's absolutely profound. Never once in my life did I ever think that I would start a business that ends up in not only Belarus, but the easternmost province of Belarus in terms of Orsha, with their offshore zone for tech companies and other things that, mind you, has even greater incentives than even the Park of High Technologies. And that was,
you have. sorry, you have the high-tech park, but also there is a new, well, not a very new initiative, but there is another thing that is called Great Stone. So this is the industrial park, which is actually focused on high technology as well. And when you compare the incentives that you get in that park, in that Great Stone Park, they're mind-blowing, really. So I think that, you know,
Okay. I'm transitioning to Russian now because I have a little bit of a treat for you. One of the ladies that was responsible for the input in the creation of decree number 8 is sitting right next to me. And so I would like Oksana to, she's going to make a question or a statement, and we'd be interested in hearing your response. So Oksana?
Sure.
Question?
Either a question or a comment on Belarus, on digital content.
Восьмой декрет, подписанный президентом Республики Беларусь.
So I will translate. The 8th decree signed by the President of Republic of Belarus. It settles the certain rules of the game. Okay.
Он установил определенные правила игры. И эта игра позволила сегодня рассмотреть цифровую трансформацию, в том числе цифровую экономику, как выдающийся рывок для экономики страны.
So, and this decree views the advancement in digital economy and digital business as area of breakthrough for the country's economy.
Восьмой декрет довольно активно и очень основательно распределил функционал по цифровой экономике и определил участие IT-компаний, продуктовых и технологических, которые получили льготы по налогам и по бизнес-процессу.
So the 8th decree defined the areas of digital transformation and digital economy, and has sort of assigned a number of IT companies responsible for this, which have received tax certain advancements in tax and business processes.
Особая роль выделена токенам, цифровым активам. Под этот инструмент создано специальное постановление Минфина. О нем можно ознакомиться на официальном сайте Парка высоких технологий.
So special attention paid to digital financial assets, including tokens, digital tokens, and the Ministry of Finance has issued special regulation covering this, and this regulation is available on the website.
И тем самым в стране появилась положительная динамика говорить о цифровой экономике и работать с ее ресурсами.
So this set up the positive dynamics for digital economy in the country and to development of digital resources of the country. Thank you.
Особенно это касается токенов, которые будут сопровождать смарт-контракты.
Especially, particularly, it concerns the tokens which are associated with smart contracts.
И главным достижением я могу сказать, что с приходом корпорации Relex в Беларуси появилась первая модель, которая будет предложена для всего рынка.
And one of the greatest achievements was that with the advance of Relex Corporation, Relex company to Belarus, we have received a positive role model which will be used for development of the whole market.
Наряду с декретом принят еще один не очень сильный, но важный декрет региональной экономики в городе Орша, где предоставили очень-очень много активов для бизнес-процессов и льгот.
So alongside, there was some regional regulation development in Orsha, in the city of Orsha, where they have adopted regional regulation to advance digital economy. Thank you.
So that was a mouthful. Very interested to hear your input on that.
Well, I totally agree with that. I remember having a discussion with Denis Aleynikov, I think, as far as I remember his name correctly, who drafted the law. It was again last year. I totally agree with the fact that it might not have brought the sort of 100% of the results that were expected, but what the law has done so far is definitely empower Belarusians to do more and to try harder. I remember the discussion with a couple of investment funds, even Russian or Belarusian, and that is something. I remember the reaction to that. They were very positive about it. So I think that on this end, we definitely have that already. There is still a little bit that has to be done to improve the legislation to attract foreign companies more foreign companies than there are there right now.
Andrew, your session was moderated by Victor Kane, and we had a comment from his side, like saying he had said while speaking about Industry 4, Industry 4 would lead to reductions of jobs. And you had quoted with some facts, like there are more vacant positions all across the developed countries. So here is a contradictory perspective. Maybe you can connect with Professor Victor, or I'm passing on the mic so you can he'll make a comment and then maybe you can.
Yeah, I guess to reiterate what I said in my presentation that Ride was talking about, in that a lot of the developing world, you might see in Industry 4.0, you might see an actual reduction in jobs in particularly low-skilled positions because of automation and robotics taking over some. I wonder, is that something that in your emerging markets, is it going to be an issue?
Well, it is already an issue to some extent, because some of our countries are, like, if you look at Poland, for example, or the Czech Republic, they're already suffering from too few or too little talent. And there is a number of issues here. One of the issues is that, after most of the countries joined the European Union, a lot of people from these countries migrated to, for example, here to the UK or to Germany or other countries in Western Europe. On the other hand, you have elderly people or seniors, if you will, who are not really taken care of properly. And by that, I mean they're not really engaged on the labor market. Of course, you have the trends or the processes that are taking place right now, such as automation and robotics. I think that I would say that there will be a shift and this is already happening, a shift in jobs. So robotics and automation will take over. So there will be fewer people needed in that area where people actually work right now, but that will be shifted somewhere else. So I think that this is still going to be an issue, even if we have more automation and more robotics. The other thing is that, which I think I have to mention, is that robotics and automation are very trendy words, and for some companies, they have. I mean, like if you look at our region, some countries are really far behind when it comes to implementing robotics and automation in their manufacturing processes, for example. So I think that it's good to be talking about automation, but you actually have to start implementing it in your organization. And in I would say the vast majority of organizations here, it's not fully implemented, or it's not even, I mean, they haven't even started implementing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the present state of Industry 4.0 anyway, is that implementation is not far along, and we're going to see a much slower movement towards things like robotics and automation. Ultimately, it will have an impact on job movement, job type, and people moving from job to job, having to be reskilled, upskilled in certain ways.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point.
This is the challenge, I think,
it is.
That we're facing right now.
Yeah, great. Well, that was a great talk. We appreciate that. I think we're going to keep him online over here, but we should let him go, because I know we want to move to Ride. You're going to be talking about something in particular, yeah?
So I would like to thank you all for having me there. It's a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And like I said, if you are interested in getting in touch, just Google Emerging Europe and you'll find all the details there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a just last quick comment here. Andrew, once again, a big thanks. Sorry for keeping you waiting for quite some time. The program has got a little delayed, but once again, thanks. And I look forward to connecting and collaborating with you in the coming events. Thank you once again. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have to introduce you. You are our next speaker, yes? I think that's going to reach us to the end of today. So I will pass it on to you for a topic. I don't even know if it's related to my topic. I guess we're going to find out, yeah? Okay.
Thank you, Professor Victor. Big thanks. Thanks to all of the participants here. Joseph, Keith, Oksana. Keith particularly helping throughout. Joseph, needless to say about you. And the participants traveling 24 hours or more than 24 hours, coming all the way. I would not get into a very rigorous presentation here. I would sum up certain topics being already covered, and also add on to some of possibly new, could be possibly new to some of you, or some of you already working on that. So let's start with, I mean, again, a very general understanding. What is blockchain? Let me give you a very general definition, example rather. Say you are chatting on a chat box and you write, we are here in Yangon. So this is the first statement you make. You correct it and then rewrite, we have been in Yangon for the past 5 days. Your first statement gets recorded as the first correction, and your second statement remains. So what happens is this is the technology. This is an underlying technology which did not exist in the past. So anything that gets, I mean, you would have blocks whereby things get recorded on every step you take. So the other party clearly are witnessing the changes that you make. So in similar ways, I'm giving you a very rudimentary example. There could be big smart contracts, not big in fact, they are smart contracts, meaning smart. And Professor Victor has already elaborated a big speech on Industry 4, which I would dwarf him like adding much. But could you mind opening the Hृदय folder? Yeah, Hृदय. So 2 slides basically I would like to show here, share. Yeah, also open the other one. Yeah, so this is the where we are. We are in Myanmar, right at the middle. You see, there is a this was a Relex. We had in fact Scott and myself had written an article for South Asia Democratic Forum, and we had put up this picture. So Relex is creating a platform like a platform where we would have projects like all across the world. Like some are already there. This is still we have kept it at a back burner, but we hope to redo it very soon. So this is a road that connects from the way there to here, and then it goes up. Like Vietnam, the section is already connected, so there's not much of trouble. And could you mind opening the other picture once? Yeah. So you see, there is a business ecosystem. Try to correlate here. There's a business ecosystem emerging. Some parts are under construction. Some are partially constructed. There is a blank patch, constructed. So what happens in the process? A road or a highway is created. An international highway gets created. You have a system which surrounds the entire international highway. This can only become functional once there is not just movement of goods to the corridor, also a digital connectivity connecting all the nitty-gritties. Like the more residences here, the more they are interconnected, with their ecosystem is what is the value system. Value system needs to be created. So there is a need for either the road first to come up or a very larger integrated system which can drive up the road. If you have more people in need of passage of goods, so the road would subsequently come up. There has been a lot of delay, like the IMT corridor has perpetually been there. Oh, it somehow, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the early 2000s which it started, but this was the same time when India in fact erected more fences along Burma, which is not being covered in the mainstream scholarly literature at times. So this was exactly the time when India had put up more barriers along the borders, like created the fences. Now things are changing. Now things are absolutely changing in the sense India cannot have a Western connectivity because of the land barrier we have with Pakistan. So the only way we can connect, have a land connectivity, which is much easier, is on its eastern front, and the first country that comes is Myanmar. We need to. I was having a talk with a gentleman today, and we discussed like why is it that we don't have much of Indian goods here in Myanmar, despite the fact that the manufacturing industry in India is nowadays getting very well established. Industry 4 is nothing but automation and data exchange along the manufacturing process. Also here comes Industry 5. Anybody of you working on Industry 5, sir, or any idea? Victor, sorry, Vladimir, any idea on Industry 5? You are like IT expert, like all doing all automation and data related things. If not, like let me just very briefly. So Industry 5 is nothing but reduction of wastes. So you are reducing wastes alongside the automation process. So it's you are bringing into synergy the man, machine, and the environment. So the Industry 5 somehow has already started alongside Industry 4 in some countries, in the developed countries. Now coming back to Myanmar, we cannot talk about Industry 4 and Industry 5 unless we get the Industry 1 right. So here what is a need is like the basic digitization, which is why we have tried to get get people like off your all your likes, sir. It's really nice having the patience to hear us all throughout the day. Sick Fried and others like coming here. So here is a need for a digitization drive along the borders, India Myanmar border. What is needed is digitize record a repository of a digital repository which can monitor the exchange of goods. So these are the basic things that is needed, and we all collectively should now work up towards increasing the like bettering the image of the country here. And this is it. So thanks once again. Thanks for joining us. We are all tired, I believe. Victor should take on the mic from here and maybe share a few words.
Yeah, I just want to close really making a point. You know, when I have my presentation on Industry 4.0, I said that you got to dream big. But the reality is that countries like Myanmar and the cities within it and other countries in the underdeveloped region, they cannot reach the potential of Industry 4.0 unless they have money, resources in the economy and government to support that. If you look at Singapore, it's a country that has excelled so far in Industry 4.0 because the government is behind it, and there's wealth in Singapore. So I don't want to suggest to you that just because I presented this very interesting concept of Industry 4, that this is going to take off in Myanmar and other areas. It's going to take time and resources to do that. I think that's my takeaway for you guys on that. I think we're going to, I don't know if there's any other points, any other questions anybody has, either on this topic or anything else. I'll open it up to anybody that has a question at all. And if not, yes, Scott. There's a microphone here.
Victor, I was just thinking about what you were saying with 3D printing and how, you know, when we get more widespread use of 3D printing to produce more consumer goods, obviously labour costs are kind of irrelevant in that environment. How much production do you think will move back to the consumer markets under that scenario over the next sort of 10 to 20 years? Because I think that could have quite a massive impact associated with the rollout of Industry 4.0 that you were talking about.
Well, you know, clearly 3D printing, which is again sort of augmented manufacturing, is only going to work for certain kinds of products and product categories. You can't expect a complete rollout of 3D printing for products that can't be 3D printed. Okay, that's why you're seeing things like engine parts are being able to be 3D printed, and then I talked about Nike and footwear, but there are lots of different products out there that are not going to be able to conform to 3D printing. So I don't know how massive it's going to be. I think we're going to see some major developments on 3D printing. We already are, but again, it's really based on sort of type of product, and it always is based on type of product. I can't tell you exactly which ones. We're still on the beginning of 3D printing. It's a good question. Yeah.
Scott, I actually know a person who owns a 3D printing company in the US, Indian based here. So what he had shared with me is basically they do demo, like they come up with scanned copies of the 3D, and it's good to perform demo experiments on this 3D printouts. So this is the purpose, and like any big machine or any big machine, whatever it be, so it drastically cuts down cost. You can do all of the experiments on the model, and then when you create the real project, the cost becomes like you have a efficient project. So that's basically the cost is massively reduced.
Any other questions? Well, let me turn it back to Keith, maybe Keith or Joseph to close out. Yeah.
Please have a seat. I know it's been a long day. I think that we got a wide grasp of what's needed for digital transformation, not just across the investment space, which we're more familiar with, but also along the political and the security space. All of these spheres, I remember that there was an infographic before that was talking about common ground, and I believe that that was from Mr. Siegfried Wolf. He was talking about achieving common ground. I think that solutions that are deployed, such as our blockchain-based investment solution and our ecosystem that I'm working directly with Oksana Lozitskaya and the Relex Belarus team, I think that there needs to be moves forward with these considerations in mind to achieve what we're looking to do here and to provide a real solution to these frontier market developing economies. I think that was the takeaway that I got from an investment perspective, and I hope those from the geopolitical side of things realize that there are a rapidly expanding new spectrum of investment vehicles that allows people to achieve their whether it be political or security aims. There is now more adequate vehicles and more efficient vehicles in order to achieve that. I think it was very profound as far as what we heard from Victor Kane in terms of Industry 4.0. I thought Mr. Siegfried Wolf did a very good job of bringing me back to the geopolitical realm of where I used to be. And I think that Shravana Barua did a very good job of bringing us to another area in terms of health, along with Mr. Ravindra Jain, who I think also gave us an idea that digital transformation is not just in technology as far as Silicon Valley type stuff. It also impacts legacy industries such as healthcare, of which Shravana mentioned that telecommuting is going to be a much needed band-aid to the problem of administering medical care across large distances. So I would also like to thank some more brave speakers that have come on, some of which that had direct wartime experience. It's not the most pleasant thing to have, but sometimes it's a necessary experience in some people's lives. So I think that there was some bravery involved in telling the story of what's needed. The solutions aren't necessarily easy, but he does have the bravery of saying what needs to be done, and I applaud that, sir. I think that particularly in Myanmar, what we also learned is that the development of an adequate security framework is absolutely essential to safeguard economic prosperity for the country. So I think that these things were knit together. We did find the common ground as far as what Mr. Siegfried Wolf was saying. In closing, I just would like to mention that as far as the Relex Capital platform at relexcapital.com is a platform that facilitates investments around the world. Go on the platform, see what's there. Go on there in the next couple weeks. We'll be having some more offerings. We work with real estate development funds. We work with concerned parties in Belarus regarding the launch of new projects. We have gotten an understanding with the government in northern Vietnam in which to start working with them through blockchain-based investment funding vehicle through Relex to help them develop roads and help them develop a university, of which that UN ambassador, Andrea Romeli Garcia, and I just came back from on that trip. So just like I want to bring it right back to what Shravana was saying, I think that she had the biggest impact in the sense that there are forgotten pockets and corners of the world that most people don't think about, but that's where the greatest work is needed. And that's what I discovered last week when, a week or so back, when I was at the Chinese-Vietnamese border. And when I saw firsthand the developmental challenges that are needed, and I absolutely saw challenges in terms of telemedicine challenges and things like that. So I would just say from the mix of security, geopolitics, and the investors present here today. I think it was a great mix for us to understand everyone's perspectives so that we can find common ground to drive solutions ahead. Pride, would you like to say anything else?
Very last, we have all come being as guests to Joseph. Joseph intends to start a university ahead, and I would really humbly put a request to all of you to contribute in your personal capacity, not necessarily in terms of finances, but resources of the sort like what you have. We can collectively, this could be the construction on a very humble note has already started. And a private university in Myanmar, which has connections to Russia, Portugal, Brussels, Australia, Vietnam, India. So that could be a wonderful initiative, but we need to be connected and help and assist Joseph in his dream to actualize. Thank you once again, Keith.
Absolutely, and if we all put our resources together, it may very well be the first university in Myanmar. So what an accomplishment that will be, huh? I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. I would like to personally thank Mr. Joseph Winhalangu for organizing the whole thing. And some final words from Joseph, and we will be concluding the event.
So, in conclusion, thank you very much to everyone who comes from very far Russia, Belarus, Belgium, Australia, Vietnam, and in Yangon. So, thank you very much for all your efforts, your spending time, and then we are very grateful to you that your visit will bring good positive impact in a stage of international news, international political platform about Myanmar, and then we look forward keeping contact one another and let us do good things for the good of our human beings. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much. And for foreigners who stay here, tomorrow morning we will leave city tour tomorrow 8:30 from the hotel reception. So please be ready 8:30. Then we will bring you city tour, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Oksana, can I get your business card? Переводи. Nice to meet you. You can call me John. I'm from WeWork. There's an application mainly based on booking. You can add me on LinkedIn right now. You don't have to find the tour. Find it before. Ah. Yeah. Sounds good. You guys did really great. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback, of course. Yeah. Ah, yes, Oksana would like us all to do a photo at the front. Really? Oksana wants us to do a photo at the front. Like all of us. Yes, excuse me, if you guys can come up on the stage, we're going to do a quick photo, yeah?
Participation.
You gonna do the tour? Yeah. Oh, you're doing the tour? Yeah. I'll see you.
Алексей! Go! Go! Я буду 2 слова говорить. Go!
I think by the way, it's ideally right. I'm right here. You know? You've been doing a lot of Salah. You're in back. Oh, no. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Spasibo, cameraman.
Sorry?
Yes.